Welcome to Commander Central, episode 13. That's lucky number 13 in our case. No triskaidekaphobia here. There's also no pechnophobia, which is a fear of playing cards. There's no xerophobia, which is a fear of dice. And there is no calandrophobia, which is the fear of beautiful men. Before we get started, how many cards in Magic history have a CMC of exactly 13? Trivia question for you guys.
Exactly 13.
5.
There couldn't be many. I'm going to guess 10.
1.
Oh, really?
And it's been released in the last 2-ish years.
Emrakul.
Emrakul is the only CMC 13
The
card.
Promised End.
Yep.
Really?
Some trivia to start the show. This is Commander Central. I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
So what has everyone been up to?
Not a whole lot.
We rocked out at the Foo Fighters the other night.
We did. Max and I did not get to play this week because we went and saw Foo Fighters on Tuesday. Chris played
Multiple games.
Yeah, he held the fort down and
Yes,
played a bunch
I
of
did.
games.
Might have made some enemies, but it's all good.
You played Max's decks.
You made
Yeah.
enemies with my decks?
Yeah, with your decks.
Great.
Well, we went and saw Foo Fighters. That was a really good show.
Great show.
They played so long, I got tired and had to sit down. That's how long the show was.
Oh, really?
Almost
Yeah.
4
It
hours.
was almost 4 hours,
the main
Wow.
act.
including the encore and stuff. But it was an excellent show.
My sister-in-law fell asleep a few times.
Yeah,
way
she
past
did,
her
she did.
way past her bedtime. She's like, the sitter needs to go. Like, I think I heard her looking at tell my brother, I might go home. You're getting an Uber.
Oh, no.
And as we're driving home, Max's brother's like looking up, like, is there any other shows happening? Like, I can drive to Des Moines for the show tomorrow night.
They're in Champaign, Illinois tomorrow. Let's go.
So he clearly had a good time. Yeah, it was an excellent concert. So we had a good time there. I wanted to tell a quick story though. So I went and saw Thor with my son last weekend.
No
Thor,
spoilers, please.
I will
Same
not
here.
spoil anything. It was excellent. So go see Thor Ragnarok if you have not seen it yet.
Yep, really want to. Along
So-
with the Justice League.
Boo.
That is not going to be good. Maybe it will be, but
I just
I
want to
don't
see
think so.
Superman with the mustache.
That's
But
right,
anyways,
right,
anyways, back
exactly.
on with your story.
So we get in and sit down, and I could smell something, and I'm looking around, and a dude like 3 seats down from us, I don't know how he got it in, had a bucket of KFC, like the real legit, like big round huge bucket of chicken, and he's got a wing out, and he's gnawing on, and I'm like, well, hey man, good for you. You wanted chicken with your movie, you snuck in a bucket of chicken. Well played.
Right?
Except the movie ends and you stay through the credit sequence, and eventually the lights come on, everyone gets up, and I looked over there, and then on the ground between his legs was a mound of chicken bones and like gristle and stuff. He was just dropping the bones in the ground.
What?
Oh,
So there's like
on.
a pile. It looks like something's
up.
been sacrificed there in the aisle at the movie theater. So I went from respecting the guy to being like, that is so gross.
That's just not even nice. I mean, you snuck it in. You might as well
Right.
clean it up on
And
your way
just,
out.
imagine that poor theater cleaner kid who has to come in there to like sweep up the wrappers on the floor, and there's a giant mound of like chicken bones and gristle and
Ask for a second bucket and put that on the
Right,
ground and
right,
chuck
exactly.
it in there.
Yeah, there's
Oh.
definitely a better way to do that.
I gotta up my food game at the movies now. Can we sneak in like toppers or something?
You can, if you can sneak in a bucket of chicken, you can sneak in anything at that
We
point.
can just go downtown. They serve pizza and beer anyways. So.
That's
yeah, but
true,
That's
yeah.
not fun. You gotta sneak the stuff in.
It's the challenge.
We did that once. We got a large soda, then we got another empty one, and my buddy snuck in a flask, and we
Oh, yeah.
poured the soda over into the other one, so we had half and half, and then poured the flask in the two, and sat and watched a movie and drank.
Nice. I think that is. So how about games? Chris was the only one that played this week, I think, right?
Yeah.
Any interesting games we played stories from you?
You know, Max, you played with me this week as well. Well, I suppose it was late last week, but
Well, yeah, on Friday night
Yep.
we played.
big thing I wanted to bring up is I'm super peeved at people that don't listen to me anymore.
I was there for this.
Like, I tried to explain to new players in the commander setting, when you're playing multiplayer, the theory of trying to play your turn out ahead.
Like
So, like you're-
planning it out.
Well, not necessarily planning it, but where the situation came down to it, I had 2 life left. The guy to my left, whose turn was next, was running the Elemental General
Horde of Notions.
with Rancor on him.
Okay.
And he turned to attack me. And I told him straight up, I'm like, do not attack me, attack someone else. He's like, but why? I'm like, well, Max has
Ormondal.
tapped by my Meek Stone, so he won't untap. And Max also has a guy with Fear, who I can't block, who can kill me on his turn. I was like, so you attack someone else, prevent Ormondal from untapping. Max kills me. It saves you a turn. Well, he turned and he attacked me and killed me.
Well, I wasn't helping the situation because I was sitting there going, you want that KO on your score sheet. You
were arguing it. But, Max, you'll agree with me. I was correct in my...
he should have let me kill you or let someone else kill you.
Yeah, I had no problem dying. It wasn't like I was trying to stay alive and win the game or anything. I was just trying to explain the proper sequencing of what you should do to, better survive the game.
Sure.
So I just...
I won both games that night I played.
Because no one listened to me.
No one listened to you.
Well, didn't you win both your games with Max's decks this week, too?
Yes, I played your Lycia deck.
Yep.
And went Chandra's Ignition into like 6 or 8 creatures and the 2 players and gained a crap ton of life. And then ended up winning that game. And then I went Infinite with Max's Brago deck. Which I didn't realize you could do this, but I found a way of doing it.
What did you do? What was the combo?
You had Peregrine Drake or Palancron.
Okay.
With the Deadeye Navigator.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
Then I went copy Deadeye Navigator with one of the creature copy things and soulbound it to the Mirror Battlesphere and then made infinite creatures.
Oh, okay. And just, then we were able to swing out the next turn, I would assume.
After casting Sphinx's Rev for 60 and taking 60 cards out of the deck and still not finding Reliquary Tower, which is a horrible feeling.
I need to put a Thought Vessel in that deck.
Just for a backup
Just for
Reliquary
a
Tower
backup.
plan. Yeah.
And you can blink it, so...
Reliquary Tower is good, and I would imagine we'll talk about that card at some point here on the show, since we're going to be talking about utility lands. But before we get there, any news, Max?
Yeah, we have a couple bits of news. The Pro Tour was this past weekend, and Seth Manfield took the victory with Sultai Energy.
I watched a few of the games. It was a fun deck to watch play.
No, I don't play Standard, but I think Teamer Energy is the better of the 2 decks just because you can use your energy more efficiently.
Energy's hard to deal with.
I have to toot my own horn a little bit. We didn't talk about this last week, but my picks for the top 2 decks for the Pro Tour was going to be Mardu Vehicles and Energy of some sort. And Mardu Vehicles did make top 8, and no one believed me that it was still a deck out there.
I was kind of surprised to see it do so well.
It made top 4.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it did.
No one believed me. It's still a deck. It's on, I wouldn't necessarily consider it top tier, but it's on the fringe, and when it comes, you're not ready for it because you're ready for everything else.
Right.
Our other bit of news is we got the full spoilers for From the Vault Transformed.
Jerks.
And we have a little egg on our face after our spiel last week of no baby Jace, and come to find out all 5 Flipwalkers are in the set, just not Jace didn't get the front and center attention like he normally likes and deserves.
Which is shocking.
It is very shocking.
It's actually a really good looking set. I mean, the only cards that I was mad about are the Transform Dagger that was in
Dark Ascension.
Dark Ascension, I think,
and
which is Blade of, or whatever it's called. I can't think of the name
one that
right
transforms into the 10/10 or
Yeah.
whatever?
Into the demon.
And
The black flip enchantment from Ixalan.
yeah, which was kind of surprising. Of all the ones to pick, they picked that one. That was kind of weird too.
I think it's because it's the most playable, aside from Search for Azcanta. Because it is a greed. It's a greed.
It is, but it's tough. It's so tough to flip though, especially in
you
Commander.
don't need it to flip. You just it's a greed.
But it's a good looking set. I went from being really disappointed because, like, I think last week we were all like, oh man, now we're down on it, to now I'm back up on it. I'll try to buy one for sure, I think.
I really want to find a playset of those Delvers too. I love the art on the Delver.
Art is great in those Delvers. There's a couple new ones. The new Garruk art is great too.
Yes.
I wish they would have done new Avacyn art, to be honest with you.
For
Instead
the
of
flip.
doing the same art. Because I think a new art would have looked pretty sick on it with the foiling.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, social media.
So we heard from quite a few people on Twitter. I'm just going to name a few here. At Kyoji Takanochi, at MTG Mudsta, at Eric Tiernan, at C. Van Swagger, and at Crazy Sheriff. They all replied to a question that we posted last week asking about what everyone's favorite utility lands are. Now, most of these people, all different responses. Like, there wasn't much overlap.
Yeah, that was cool to see.
Yep. So looking forward to hearing what your 2 utility lands are that you guys love. So just to let everyone know, you can reach us on Twitter at CMDR Central. Search us up on Facebook at Commander Central, or find us online at www.commandercentral.com.
Yep, and if you like the show and wish to support us, you can find us on Patreon/CMDR Central.
For $5, we will send you nudes. For $10, we'll stop. And I think that's a much better deal, I think. I have 2 real quick social media things. one of the EDH rec editors, Henry Stukenberg, I promised him that I would say the following on air. Group Hug is my favorite archetype, and I want to play nothing else. That's it. I told him I would say that. I'm saying it. It's a ginormous lie, but I'm going to say it. We also had a Patreon supporter, and I think we messed his name up when we were pronouncing it last week. So I went and talked to a coworker of mine who speaks Spanish to get a suggestion on the pronunciation.
Okay.
And here's the exact thing she said to me. Bitch, I speak Portuguese. That's exactly what she began with. But then she helped me out and said it's probably, the pronunciation is probably Octavio Quiones Flores.
Okay.
So she helped me out with that after calling me a bitch.
That is great.
So apologies, that's really terrible that I confused Portuguese with Spanish, but I did.
I'm sure it's a similar dialect.
Yeah, it's close. I mean, yes, it's close enough. It's closer than what I was going to say, so. All right, so let's talk about utility lands. No other format lets you run utility lands, really. Like, your land slots are really precious in other formats. You can't just, like, run a Majuka Bog, just on the off chance someone has a graveyard you want to hit. And in EDH, it's in 35,000 decks on EDH Rec, Majuka Bog is.
Yep. I can think of one deck out of all the formats that is technically runs a lot of utility lands, and that would be Lands
The
and
lands
Legacy.
deck, right, yeah. So, this is the format where, like, if you want to run a bunch of cool utility lands, you can. So let's, like, talk about a little bit here.
Should we define what we consider a utility land?
Sure, for the purposes of this conversation.
Right.
And I guess we didn't really clarify this 100% ahead of time, but, like, I only was looking at lands that did a thing aside from making mana. So, like, I didn't count Ancient Tomb, which is a great land, but I didn't count it as a utility land because it's just a really good land. I guess by that definition, technically the temples from
Theros block.
Theros would be, I didn't count those because they make 2 colors too. They're more duals than they are utility lands.
And they only use their utility once.
Right.
Right.
Unless you're doing some sort of
Although, I mean, I guess
shenanigans.
Majuka Bog does too, but, like, for purposes of me, Majuka Bog is a utility land and the Theros temples are not. So what did you guys use for kind of your criteria?
I kind of went off the same thing, a land that makes a mana and does something else, usually.
Yep,
Okay.
something that has multiple uses to it.
Okay.
Of some sort. Well, I shouldn't necessarily say multiple uses, but has a different purpose to it than just creating mana.
Like, I didn't look at Nykthos for Cabal Coffers either for that reason.
Nor did I.
Whereas
No.
Urborg, which, only makes mana, but it fixes your stuff, makes swamps and stuff, I do consider that a utility land. So, anyway, that's kind of what we're using for definitions here. In man lands, I guess it could go either way too. I consider the dual ones more duals than I do utility lands, but there's some colorless ones that I would consider more utility lands than I would anything else.
For the purpose of EDH, I don't really consider man lands that great of a land to really even consider as a utility land, because why would you really run them unless you have a basic strategy for them?
Yep.
Usually that's kind of my thought on it as well. Just because coming into play tapped hurts, and hitting someone for 2 damage is a lot less useful in Commander. Having that option to turn it into a dude and swing for 2 or 3 or whatever it is less useful in Commander than it is in any other format where that's 15% of someone's life total or 20% of someone's life total at some point. So
yeah, because you got to take out 120 life to win the game in Commander, whereas in a regular form you only have to take out 20.
Yep.
So the first question I want to ask you guys is, if you could only have one utility land in a deck, what would that one be?
I'm going first on this one.
All right.
Okay.
Reliquary Tower. Oh, eat it.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
I know, that's why I went first.
Well, now, not in terms of, like, favor, but like power wise. Like, if you only have one for the utility, would it be Reliquary Tower?
I honestly think so.
Okay.
Same here.
I thought about it because I know I like Reliquary Tower a lot, but I think that's me liking it. I don't know if it's necessarily that awesome. I went with Strip Mine.
Okay, that was. I have 2 more on there too, and Strip Mine was the next one.
Just because, particularly now that Growing Rights exists, and now everyone has a Gaia's Cradle if they want it.
True.
I feel like there's enough other awesome utility lands that, like, being able to answer them is really, really useful. But I love Reliquary Tower.
I do too. I think Reliquary Tower goes in every deck unless I'm running 4 or more colors. Then it doesn't.
I would agree, unless I'm doing like a graveyard shenanigan type deck, then it doesn't go in there.
So I did some Reddit reading. Is Reliquary Tower good? And there's a bunch of threads talking about
Uh-oh.
how noobs run Reliquary Tower. And so here's the logic behind. And now, granted, Reddit is Reddit, so it is what it is. But everyone's there is like, you don't need to keep 15 cards. If you keep the best 7, that should be enough to win. And I guess that's like right, technically, but that's like a perfect situation where like you've just drawn the cards that get you that combo win, and not everyone plays in that way. And there's been so many times when having that Reliquary Tower when I do some ridiculous Sphinx's Rev or do a Decree of Pain or something and draw 11 cards, and being able to keep all 11 of them allows me to do something really stupid that just keeping the best 7 wouldn't let me do.
Yeah, I agree with that because, I mean, unless you are playing combo base, like strictly combo base, where you can win with just the 7 that you have, I like having multiple extra cards because you never know what's going to come down the pipe out of your opponent's turns. They could reset the board, they could do something stupid, and then your whole game plan changes, and half of those cards you drew are worthless now, and you got to play the other half that you have.
Right.
Yep, I totally agree. I'm not good at picking the best 7 because I do that. I think about the what ifs. And so, yeah, I like to keep all 11, not just cut it down to 7.
Well, and there's been enough times in my Sphinx deck where like having that huge mitt full of cards, and then I put that in one of which is a scroll rack, which then lets me like essentially have my whole library at whenever I want to. I can basically switch my hand with my library kind of. Now, obviously, at that point in the game, you probably should be winning if you can do that, and I usually do. But like, if I had to pitch down to 7, I couldn't do that. So,
Yep.
I don't know. I like Reliquary Tower. Maybe it's kind of a safety blanket kind of thing, but I love having it in decks.
Oh, yeah.
I think the best thing about it is it makes colorless mana comes into play on tap, so it's really not hurting you at all.
Nope.
So beyond obviously liking Reliquary Tower and Strip Mine, so what are some other go-to utility lands that like you found you put in most of your decks? And I'm not talking like ones that in this particular deck it's obviously good, but like ones that when you're building a deck, just like today, if we started building a deck, you'd almost always go, this is going in, this is going in, this is going in.
My first ones are always land destruction lands. So
you start off with a Strip Mine
with
and
a strip
something
mine
else.
or a ghost quarter. I usually run 2 in case someone destroys mine and I'm not paying attention and do it in response.
Well, so sub question on land destruction lands, how many? So you run 2. How many do you run, Chris?
2 at the most. I mean, I could run 3, but I play a lot of 1v1 commander, which takes up my tech edges and my wastelands.
Okay.
So they don't end up going in the decks.
Right.
I've been I run 2-ish. Some of my decks I've been cheating and only running 1, but Growing Rights alone has made me like go back through and be like, okay, this deck only has 1, and I should have a second one in there.
I've been running a lot of 2 of now because of I've been seeing a lot of other annoying lands, which we're probably going to come up on and talk about. But one in general we'll talk about is a wonderful land that's called the Maze of Ith that I absolutely despise.
Maze of Ith has been around forever, but like it was a $25 card for a long time, and now it's a $10 card.
Yes.
So not only every set adds a new good utility land, whether it's Inventor's Fair or Mirror Pool or Growing Rights of Itlmoc that turns into
the Cradle.
There we go, the IKEA's Cradle.
Did you just say IKEA's Cradle?
I did not come up with that. That's something I've read elsewhere.
The instructions are all pictures, and you're usually missing a screw.
Yes, exactly.
I had to make sure I heard that right.
But like prices on stuff have dropped too, making Maze of Ith, things like that, easier to put into decks.
Yes, by far.
So we usually seem like we all tend to go with 2 land destruction lands. Anything else? What else goes in decks?
Depending on what type of deck I'm running, I put a combat trick land in, so like a Core Haven or the Maze of Ith. Usually I put Core Haven in because it does tap for mana versus Maze not tapping for mana.
I remember once upon a time looking at Core Haven and being, okay, so it's kind of like a bad Maze of Ith.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays I look at it and kind of like, man, Maze of Ith's kind of a bad Core Haven. Being able to tap it for mana is so useful.
Yes.
Not that Maze isn't good, but Core Haven being able to tap it for mana makes it tougher to screw things up.
Yeah, you almost do a Ric Flair, woo!
Right,
when someone plays an Urborg and you have a Maze of Ith out, you're like,
yeah, oh, that is
yes.
so much, that feels so much better. Yeah, because I think a lot of people they count Maze of Ith as a land, and you really shouldn't count it as a land in one of your land slots.
No, I completely agree with that.
So I'm kind of on board there. If I can run one of those lands, I tend to. I think I have one deck that has Core Haven and Maze of Ith, but I tend to run usually one of them. Not in particularly in a 2-color deck or a 1-color deck. 3 or 4 or 5, it's tougd, but I'd for sure do in smaller decks. Homeward Path, which was on our recent pet cards list.
Yep.
I put Homeward Path in most of my decks.
I have it in probably half of my decks.
I think I have it in most of my decks as well.
I went through and looked. The only ones I'm not running it in is my Tesa deck, because I've got a ton of sack outlets, so someone goes to steal something, I'll just sack it. And my Didgeridoo deck, because who's going to steal my tokens that
If
I
I
make?
have to, I will.
Right. And if you're going to waste a steal spell on one of my, crappy night tokens I've made, or Jeru himself, like whatever, that's your loss, my friend.
Pretty much.
So I don't run one in either of those two decks, but the rest of my decks I'm running Homeward Path for sure.
I know a big one that I've been looking at swapping into my decks, because I'm not really a big utility land player. I like playing other lands. Is Scavenger Grounds.
I've got a note on Scavenger Grounds later, but we can talk about it right now, kind of in conjunction with Bojuka Bog. If I'm playing black, I run Bojuka Bog.
Yep.
I've got it in every one of my black decks. I've got Scavenger Grounds in every deck that doesn't have a Bojuka Bog, and I've strongly considered putting Scavenger Grounds alongside Bojuka Bog in the rest of my decks. I think that card is really underappreciated.
Yeah.
Well, it makes mana, and it doesn't come into play tapped.
And
right?
unlike Bojuka Bog, when you put it into play in turn one and you're like, well, I hit your graveyard for nothing.
I've
Scavenger
seen
Grounds
that
you
so
can
many
use at
times.
will. Right. Scavenger Grounds you can like save until you need to use it.
Yep.
And sometimes you also, not that people run that many deserts, but like technically you could have more deserts in your graveyard and use those to sacrifice to it.
Yep.
So no, Scavenger Grounds is a great one. I like that a lot. I've got two decks that are green-red and both have Keswick Wolfrun in them.
Trample.
It's a win condition. Like Keswick
Yeah.
Wolfrun can win, just like alone, it wins games. Like if you have a big creature out and people aren't paying attention, doubling it and giving it trample can just kill people.
Yep, that's why, well, I'll let you continue on with our next question, because that's where we're going to go with this next, I'm assuming.
I got a couple more I was going to talk
Okay.
about quick. We all mentioned Reliquary Tower. I noticed I have Vault of the Archangels in both of my decks that are white-black.
Yep.
Are both running Vault.
Yep, I have one in my Lycia deck.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, it's 4 mana tap, and you give all your creatures lifelink and Death Touch,
Death Touch.
both of which are really, really useful.
I consider Death Touch evasion. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, kind of. It's like it doesn't force evasion, but like it makes people not want to block for
Yep.
sure.
Especially in Vault where you can do it at will,
Yep.
whether it's
And
blocking
people
or attacking.
And people forget about it
Yes.
sometimes.
I
That's
always
happened.
forget about it on my opponent's side.
I have myself plenty of times.
Deathwink can suck it.
How about another one I noticed looking through my decks? I've got Terrain Generator in a few decks, and that was one of the ones that came in on Twitter for a few suggestions.
Yep.
Terrain Generator, you can tap for 2 and put a basic land card from your hand into play tapped. So if you've got a bunch of draw and you're probably having 2 or 3 or 4 lands in your hand, let's cheat a land into play. It's a nice little mana sink and lets you accomplish something.
Yep, especially on a turn when you really don't want to do too much.
Yeah.
Like if there's a board stall out, or you're waiting, sitting on a Wrath or something, and you just want, well, I'll cheat this land out and then Wrath the board out and let them spend the time recuperating.
So those are the main ones that I was noticed like as trends in my deck. Are there anything from you guys that you found you tend to put in your decks?
Mirror Pool.
Mirror Pool's nice. I like Mirror Pool a lot.
I run that in quite a few of my decks, whether it's to copy a beater, like in Dramoka, I tend to use it to copy Archangel Thune, or anything that's going to help get the win. I've copied a Hornet Queen before.
Yep. I've run, you got some Sunhome, Fortress of pretty much kill you.
Yeah, the double strike one,
Yep.
right?
I run that one in Ural just because it's just randomly you're sitting there and you have a 20/20 Ural and you're just like, okay, how am I going to do this? You look down at your land, it's like, oh yeah, well, we'll just give him double strike. What's up?
And that's is it 2 mana red, 2 colorless red and a white.
Yep.
So 4
Yep.
mana tap to give your creature double strike though on a whim like that. That's
It
fantastic.
is very good.
You have to be red white, but like in that
Yep.
Euro deck, that's great. Teleria West. Teleria West is basically an island that comes into play tapped, but you have the option to transmute it for blue colorless, and to transmute you search your library for a card with an equal CMC and put it into your hand. So if you need to play Teleria West as a land, you just play it as a land. But like if you need to grab Pact of Negation, you can grab Pact of Negation with it.
If you need to grab a Reliquary Tower.
Right, exactly. Well, the thing I've noticed as I was looking through my decks, I'm like, oh, I've got that in decks that have some kind of a back-breaking land, like in blue-black where you can go grab Cabal Coffers, or
Yep.
in blue-green where you're playing enough creatures and you want to go grab your Guy's Cradle or whatever. in addition to, and if you don't, you just play it as a land that comes into play tapped, which sucks, but like, so sometimes that's
as long as
what's
you make
worth
your
it.
land drop, it's worth it.
Right. I've actually used it before to go get, just for fixing, to go get a command tower.
Yep.
So I've noticed that is one that I play a lot as well. Haste lands.
See, I don't see a whole lot of those out of people.
So you have, you run Hall of the Bandit Lord, don't you, Max?
I run Hall of the Bandit Lord in Jamoka.
But the strength there is you don't need, it's a haste land that doesn't require red.
Right, and I mean, people put it off because you lose 3 life to gain 1 mana.
Yep, but you automatically give haste to whatever you
Right.
cast.
And your commander has lifelink.
And my
in that
commander
deck.
has lifelink, so I'm netting 3 off of it.
The other 2 big ones are Handwear Battlements and Flamekin Village. Flamekin Village comes into play tapped, but it also produces red mana, and it gives something haste. Handwear Battlements doesn't come into play tapped, but it doesn't produce red mana. It produces colorless mana, and it costs, I think, 3 to give something haste.
Yep. And it also transforms if you're playing.
If you have Handwear Garrison, you can transform. You can meld the 2.
Meld. Yep.
I remember playing that card in your vampire deck, and I'm looking at it, and you're like, "Oh, don't worry, the rest of it's not in here."
Yeah,
I'm like, "Oh, okay."
It was just a haste enabler, and I've since taken it out of that deck because I've got my vampires are all bad. So I'm like, oh, I don't need to give this 1/1 or best case like a 2/1 vampire haste. I guess there's Draina in there, but like, okay, so the one other vampire that isn't terrible, I don't need to give it haste. So
Yeah.
I wound up taking it out, but yeah, the haste ones are. You really need to determine if it's useful in your deck, but the decks where it's useful, it's really, really good. I think you have a couple in Lycia, or no?
I don't,
You
actually.
don't? Okay. So that would be a good deck for it, I think, because it's so Voltron-y. Being able to swing right away would be useful.
Yeah. It's the 3 color is kind of hard to have it come in tapped, especially like Flamekin Village. I don't know if I can take a turn off if that's my only red mana source.
Okay. So did you guys look closely at your decks and like determine, do you run do you run too many? Is there anything like trends that you kind of spotted looking at your decks and how many utility lands you run?
I run maybe 3 to 4 at the most out of each of my decks. At the absolute most.
I'm about the same with the definition of utility land we're using today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if we go the other route, then
Yeah.
that number would start going up a
Right.
little
I run more than that.
bit.
My Dejira deck has 11 utility lands in it. My Sigarda deck has 12. Teysa had 14. Asperia had 12. Glissa had 11. And then a couple other ones had less. But so I've got a lot, which I then determined looking at it, I'm like, that's probably too many. Particularly in some of my decks, like my Teysa deck. Now, a few of those, like there's reasons. There's a high market in there, and there's there's like the Kamigawa land that has a sack outlet baked into it. It's not something Mirror the Moaning Well.
Yes.
So I have a couple sack outlets in there, which raises it up. Also, Phyrexian Tower is in there. So I have 3 lands that have sack outlets. So I mean, there's reasons I have so many in there that kind of skews those numbers. But I was also looking at, I'm like, I don't probably need Nykthos in this deck since it's a token producing deck.
Yeah, you don't really have enough permanents to make Nykthos worth it.
So even though Nykthos isn't really a utility land, I was just like, I should just replace that with a land that produces colored mana.
Yep.
So I actually, upon evaluating this, went through and I'm like, I need to take a couple utility lands out of a couple of these decks. Because you then can find yourself in a position where you get mana screwed for colored mana early on. If you just draw 3 utility lands, that's not great.
No, it's not.
That happened in my Alesha deck. I mean, technically, I don't know if you'd consider Reflecting Pool a utility land, per se.
I would call it just a fixing land. I don't know if I'd call it a utility
But when
land.
you play that and you have one other color out and then you play a Signet and you're stuck like that,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not a very good day.
And then when someone strip mines your colored source.
Yeah, so then you just
and-
have a Reflecting Pool that does nothing. Yeah, land destruction, not fun. Don't do it to your friends.
No, don't do mass land destruction.
Targeted land destruction is just
I'd rather
fine.
have mass land destruction during that game because then we would have all been on the same battlefield then.
I probably would have ended up winning that game then.
Do we want to talk about specific niches of lands? We covered Bajuka Bog and Scavenger Grounds. We touched on land removal lands a little bit, but are there any specific ones you like? So I guess the question I was thinking here is, most people run Strip Mine because it's the best, and it's $4.
Yep.
And I guess people would run Wasteland more frequently if it wasn't $30. And it was $50, and it was $70, and it was $100 before that. So like Wasteland is dropped, but it was tough to put in decks because it was expensive. So that kind of leaves for your second one after strip mine. Tectonic Edge, Ghost Quarter, I guess Dust Bowl is in there. Is there one you like over the other if you're running a second land if you can't get that wasteland? And why? Is there a reason why?
I run Ghost Quarter. That's my go-to for the second.
So that's your second slot one. Because I've gone back and forth between Ghost Quarter and Tech Edge, and it just depends. So that was a question I was wondering.
I think they are both good. Ghost Quarter has no activation,
Right.
but they gain something out of it.
Right.
Tech Edge has an activation, and they don't gain anything out of it.
And you also can't use Tech Edge on the first 4, unless they have 4 or more lands, I believe.
I prefer Ghost Quarter over Tech Edge because there are instances where I Ghost Quarter myself to fix.
Yep.
I've seen that before as well, where you've Ghost Quartered something to get the color you need, particularly in like a 4 or 5 color deck.
Right. And sometimes, like, is the basic land they're getting gonna actually be worse than that Maze of Ith or Cabal Coffers you're destroying? Probably not. So giving them that land, depending on what stage of the game you're in, isn't gonna hurt you.
True.
In Tech Edge, you can't do anything. You can't use it if they have 4 or less lands. That doesn't really come up very much. Although if you are trying to do like Denial, but even Ghost Quarter, they get a land back, so it's kind of tough to use that for land denial or mana denial. I think they're both relatively interchangeable.
Yep.
I use Ghost Quarter particularly in my Mina and Den deck. Not only is it land destruction in there, but I can use it for a landfall trigger on myself as well as fixing. It's a 2-color deck, so I don't need fixing very much, but I've absolutely used it for a landfall trigger before.
Mm-hmm.
Dust Bowl, I ran once upon a time. Dust Bowl lets you sacrifice a land to destroy a land. I think spends 4 mana, Might be 3. Has an activated ability, tap it, sacrifice a land to destroy target land. So if you are in a place where you're going to need to destroy multiple lands, maybe, Dust Bowl I think is worth considering, but it's never been something that I've felt the need to run.
Yeah. 3, tap, sack a land, destroy, target non-basic land.
Non-basic. Okay. All right.
Yep, so it's pretty much a worse wasteland.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's reusable too, unlike Wasteland. Like Dust Bowl, you can sack a different land. You don't need to sacrifice Dust Bowl, so you can use it every turn. I would imagine that's his play in Gitrog monster decks.
Probably.
I should have looked up those numbers in EDH Rec, and I didn't think to do that. Protective lands, Max mentioned this, but we can talk about that a little bit more for a minute, like Maze of Ith and Corehaven. Have you ran Mystifying Maze at all?
Nope.
The 4 mana is too much to leave open, were my thoughts on it.
Especially when you're not in colors with counter magic. I mean, if you leave 4 mana up playing blue, it's either a counter spell or you're using it for Mystifying Maze. But if you're leaving 4 mana up in mono black or Boros, that's all that's going
and
to.
Especially with the price drop on Maze of Ith, there's no point in running Mystifying Maze now.
Right, because Mystifying Maze isn't cheap. It's a couple dollars itself, and Maze of Ith is $10.
Yep.
Glacial Chasm.
I have totally ran that card.
I run it too, yep.
So what decks do you run it in, Chris? Or do you still use it?
No, I don't use it anymore.
Okay.
I was running it in my Mogus God of Slaughter deck when I would pretty much drop as many incidental AoE damage spells and then play Glacial Chasm and be like, come at me, brah, what's up?
What do you have it in, Max?
I run it in my Mizzix deck because it's very few creatures. I can kind of afford the 2 life every turn or as it escalates.
Okay.
And it just lets me be able to cast my spells for dirt cheap and not have to worry about any crackbacks from a token deck or anyone, pretty much.
For those who don't know, Glacial Chasm is an old land out of Ice Age. Does not tap for mana, so you also shouldn't count it for one of your lands unless there's an Urborg in play. And when it comes into play, you have to sacrifice a land.
Yep.
And then creatures you control can attack, and all damage dealt to you is prevented.
Correct.
Not loss of life, however.
No, it is not.
Just damage.
So Exsanguinate, you still bite the bullet.
Yep.
It
has a cumulative upkeep
of 2 life.
2 life, so it goes 2 life, 4 life, 6, 8, whatever. I've got it in 2 decks right now. I have it in my Sphinx deck. I was running it in there anyway, but then once Solemnity came out, I'm like, yay! So I've got that combo up multiple times. And I've got it in my Mina and Den deck because I have multiple ways to get non-basic lands at instant speed. So being able to like crop rotation into a Glacial Chasm when somebody thinks they're going to be able to kill me is pretty useful. And then between things like Random Up Excavator and I have a Crucible in there, so it's easier to recur and play it multiple times. And so those are the 2 decks I'm running it in. But Chasm is really, really good.
It is a super powerful card if played properly.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's also easy to play it because you can't attack.
Yep.
So it's also easy to play it badly, play it, and then not just waste a bunch of time then.
Yep. That's why I usually only put them in decks where I have very low creature counts, because if I can't attack, I'm not going to win.
Although
Agreed.
being able to just waste time is also sometimes useful. I mean, just buying yourself a couple turns sometimes is all it takes.
I know some players like that, but they don't actually win the game though neither. So
It's always good to actually try to win the game. Are there any utility lands you think are overrated in particular?
I have a few.
I'll let you discuss a few, Max.
We're gonna start with Maze of Ith.
Okay, that was on my
Okay.
list too.
My main reason is it doesn't tap for mana, like we talked about earlier, unless you have an Urborg or a Blood Moon out.
I wouldn't.
It also
Maybe I would call it overrated, but I definitely like it less than I did a year ago and 2 years ago and before that. It's lost its luster in my eyes.
I think maybe you pushed me into the overrated because it was in every deck that you ever
It
played.
I
did.
did. Once upon a time, I had it in like 6 different decks.
Yep.
it also targets, and I think especially in our meta, we have a lot of hexproof generals, or people equip their generals up to make them hexproof or have shroud. And at that point, now it's really a dead land because it's not tapping for mana, and you can't even prevent that Euro, that 40/40 Euro swinging at your face.
That's the reason that the two factors are it doesn't tap for mana, and sure, sometimes you can like untap that 4/4 or 5/5 or whatever it is, and if you do that for 4 straight turns, that's good. You save 20 damage, but most of the time, something that's worth untapping can't be targeted. I've noticed, like the stuff that you really don't want hitting you when something's coming at you and it's a 20/20, it tends to be protected. Not always, but like often enough that it's annoying,
Yes.
and it makes me then not want to run maze at that point.
I've noticed, I've done this a few times, but it does kind of bother me when you're trying to kill someone and someone uses their maze
To
untap
save
your-
someone else.
Yeah, and you're
Yep.
just like, really?
It's because people don't listen to you.
I
Right,
know.
exactly.
Ugh.
Just listen to Chris. So anyone besides maze
I have actually quite a few.
that lay
Oh,
it on
really?
us.
Okay, yeah, just shoot them out.
The hideaway lands.
I like, man,
I have a few reasons.
and I guess overrated is different than I like it because I can like a card and have it be
Right.
overrated. So
I mean,
like, those aren't the same thing.
So my reasons are they're not great at really any point in the game. I mean, if you drop the green one on turn 1, you're either filtering out your land drops or you might hit a big beater that you need later. But if you do it late game, you're filtering stuff you need.
right,
So
yeah.
that doesn't help. Second, a lot of the activation clauses aren't great in EDH. Specifically, the blue one, each player has to have no cards in hand.
Right.
And that's the black one. The blue one is a single library has to have 20 or less cards in it. Again,
Oh,
in
wow.
EDH, that's not really going to happen that
Maybe
often.
in a Phoenix deck or something, but like
Right.
running that land, hoping you can hit that condition is tough.
Where, in my opinion, the ones that are runnable would be the green one, because you need creatures total power 10 or more. The red one, an opponent was dealt 7 or more damage, so any type of damage. And then the white, attack with 3 or more creatures. So those play into those type of decks, but
The green-white one especially, the green and white one especially are relatively easy to
Yes.
hit, but I've had them work really well, and I've
Right.
had them work not great,
And-
and I'm running none of them right now in any of my decks.
I'm not neither.
neither am I, and they come in tapped, which doesn't help either.
Yeah.
And you have to make the choice. Do you activate it or do you tap it for the mana? You don't get both.
Right. And if you told me your Mossfort Bridge is always a bomb in your deck, I would believe you. I mean,
Right.
I've seen it do good stuff, but it's inconsistent enough for me that I don't
Mhm.
run
Yeah,
it
there's-
right now.
There's been quite a few times where I've played it, and you look at the top 4, and you just go, well, it's absolute garbage. It doesn't really matter what I put underneath here. It's not going to help me at all.
Right. Yeah, I've had that happen plenty of times. Or someone destroys the land and you lose the card.
Yep.
And I've had that happen to me before
Yep.
as well.
My final chunk are the Shadowmoor lands. So the most notable one would be Mistveil Plains.
Oh, those ones. Okay.
So they do something if you control X of a colored permanent.
Yes.
Yep.
So the white one is Mistveil Plains. The red one is Shuffle Your Library. Like, I didn't even know what the other ones did. That's how
Yeah, I guess
I had to look them up. The red one lets you shuffle your library. The blue one lets you look at the top card of an opponent's library. The green one, you gain 1 life. And the black one, each opponent loses a life. So the black one might be playable, but Extort is just 1,000 times better.
Doesn't the white one allow you to put a card from the bottom of your
Great.
from your graveyard on the bottom.
And that's
of your library.
Mistvale Plains.
That's Mistvale Plains, and so that's the only one I run out of all of them.
I think that's the
I
most
run
playable.
I
one.
run that one as well in my didgeridoo deck.
Yep.
The black one I could see maybe in like a Rakdos Lord of Riots deck. I think would make sense there.
Yeah,
But
because
outside-
you're trying to ping them enough to just
Right.
start dropping rack.
But man, outside of that,
That's it.
that's not that good. Yeah, I guess I didn't really know with the other ones either.
So those are my overrated lands.
Chris, do you have any?
I picked one that this is going to cause a lot of stir for my
All right,
Okay, wait.
spicy selection.
We can't
from
flip
Chris.
this table. The computer's on it.
No drinks, we're good. I chose Command Beacon. I really think it's overrated.
Oh. Okay, why is that?
Because I'm a firm believer that you should never build your deck strictly around your general. So you shouldn't have to rely on a land because your general's died 30 times to bring them back to your hand.
Yes, I would tend to agree. I don't run Command Beacon on any of my decks.
Nor do I.
Neither do I.
I can see how. Well, if you're running, what was the commander we talked about? The
Hacken.
mono-
Hacken.
Hacken.
Yes, if your deck's built around something like that, then it's an awesome card.
Yeah,
but
it makes sense. in that
99%
deck.
of other decks, I think it's overrated.
I mean, you have to have it out while your commander has been killed a bunch of times
Yep.
to really justify using it. I don't think it's bad, but like I've never played a game where I've walked away from it going, man, I really wish I would have had Command Beacon in that game.
I've never seen anybody in our shop run it.
No.
I've seen it ran once or twice. Someone has an Animar, no, not Animar, Maelstrom Wanderer deck I've seen use Command Beacon.
That makes sense because Maelstrom Wanderer is
You're trying to
so
recast,
powerful.
and you're trying to recast it as many times as
Yes.
possible. So I guess that, but as a strip mine, you can just jam into decks without thinking twice about it. Command Beacon, you don't run unless you should have a really good reason to be running it. I would think.
The Dragon.
Sure,
That's
yeah,
where I would put it. Like
sure.
9
God,
in
that's
Wooburg.
So for all of you, those of you who listen to our Dragons one, and I knocked the Dragon, I have played against a general deck like that, and it sucks to play against.
Yeah, you gotta beat it and beat it fast.
It is a very, very powerful card, and I take back all of my hate towards it. I love the card
and
now.
that deck is tuned to.
Yes.
So I didn't mention this during games we played because I wanted to move on, but I played one game last week. I went over to my neighbor's house, and him and his friend, who I've mentioned before, are just getting into Commander and playing. So he called me up and was like, "You want to play a quick game?" I said, sure. I walked over. I took that cat deck of my son's again, and he had his dragon deck out, and his friend was playing the mono red Planeswalker Commander
Duretti? Or is it Duretti? One of the
Duretti.
Duretti. Why did they get the name so similar?
Right, yeah. and he was playing, so my neighbor was playing Dragon, and he's like, I made a few changes. I was like, okay, let's see what you got going. And at one point he dropped Sarkhan Unbroken. And
Okay.
the 3-color Sarkhan. And it makes sense in that 5-color Dragon deck. And he had enough dragons that I couldn't get in on Sarkhan damage, but I was hitting him for damage with unblockable, whatever, I forget what it was, Forest Walk, so it must have been Jedit O'Hannon. On a cat. So I was hitting him unblockable and he couldn't respond to the cat. But I can't remember why I couldn't hit his Planeswalker. I just couldn't, or I wasn't, whatever it was. And he kept taking it up. But I'm like, I'll kill him before it matters. Like, I'd rather that's what it was. If I do damage to him, I'll just kill him. Who cares about the Planeswalker?
Yep.
And then we got to the point where I'm like, oh, I can kill him. Even if he ults, he can't get through and kill me. So I'm fine. So I hit him, goes back to him. He flips. He hits the ult on Sarkhan, which is going to bring in
Everything.
every dragon from your deck. But before he hits Sarkhan and he's going to roll it up, he's like, let's see. So I'm going to tap 6 first, and he plays Warstorm Surge,
Oh, no.
Game over.
which was brand new to the deck too. He's like, I think this is good in this deck, right? I'm like, Warstorm Surge, and I'm gonna tick Sarkhan down. And like, okay, well, I take 90 or whatever it's going to wind up being. I mean, it was something totally stupid.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I thought I was going to mention that story, but so I died to a Warstorm Surge with. We didn't even we're
With
like, nope.
dragons.
We're like,
Oh my
nope,
gosh.
you're good. We don't even need to have you dig those out. And then he's like, oh, can I just dig them? I'm like, yeah, fine. so he started digging all his dragons out. And they're like, all right, so you kill us?
You got any others on your list?
Yes, I do believe it's called, I couldn't remember the name of it as I put it on here. I put it as Palace. I think it's Opal Palace.
The
Yes.
+1 counter one. The
Yes.
command tower that puts a +1 counter on.
Yes, I think that is another overrated card. I think it's a very general specific card again.
So Opal Palace can produce a mana of any color, but it costs 1.
Yep.
So it comes in untapped. You can tap it for a colorless, or 1 and tap. Add to your mana pool 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. If you spent that mana to cast your commander, it enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it, equal to the number of times it's been cast from the command zone this game.
There are some decks where that's a really good card.
Yep. I
Um,
don't think it gets slotted in every
I
deck.
have seen it used in a 2-color deck with a relatively low cost commander that
Oh, that would be gross.
but who cares at that point? Like when you're casting your commander, you're putting 2 more counters on your what I can't think off the top of my head on your
Let's use Brago.
yeah right. You don't need the mana fixing at that point in that deck probably because you're playing allied colors. Who cares if Brago is a 4/6 instead of a 2/4 wherever he comes into play as? Is he 2/4?
He is a 2/4.
So like in that deck, like why are you running open? Why are you having to pay a mana to put 2 counters on a creature that doesn't help at all?
Yeah, it's one of those cards I have so many copies of, and I can never find a spot to put it. Like, it gets pulled out when I'm deck building. I'm like, this could be cool. And I'm going through, I'm like, no, that's really not. Put that back. What are you thinking?
Do you have it in your Lycia deck, Max?
No.
I had it in my old +1 counter Mimeoplasm deck, and I remember like multiple times going through the deck being like, I've literally never managed to have Opal Palace do anything.
That's why it's not in there. I just know from past experience it doesn't do much. And I have to err on the side of caution, as if I don't have the reduction for Lycia, how am I going to have that extra mana to put the counter
On the
on
commander.
her with Opal Palace?
And maybe like there are definitely decks where I think it would be great, like Skullbriar,
Yep.
who's so cheap to cast, you're probably going to cast him multiple times anyway. And if you can have Skullbriar come in, who already has counters, and you're going to have him come in with 3 or 4 more counters on him,
And he has haste, so he just
and he's
starts
got haste
flinging
and
again.
condition, like it totally makes sense there.
Marath would be a great deck to put it in.
If you ever wind up building your new
Crush.
Crash deck, it might make sense there because you're going to probably focus on +1 counter stuff. So it makes sense there, but I kind of tend to agree that one gets overplayed a little bit too.
So what about you, Dana? I'm assuming you have a big list.
I don't really have a big list.
Oh, really?
There are a couple that I go back and forth on. I've seen a lot of people run the Ravnica utility lands. There's like Prov, Spires of Order, which is a reduced damage one. There's a couple of those like goofy utility lands that are in Ravnica, and there's a couple of ones that are in Innistrad as well, like
Moorland Haunt.
or there's Backwoods
Cemetery. Nope.
Man, I should have written them
Oh,
all down.
like the
but I didn't.
Desolate Lighthouse type of
Yeah.
stuff
Yes.
like that?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
And a couple of them have useful abilities, but a lot of times I see someone play them and then it don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Alchemist Refuge is really, really good. That's the green-blue one that lets your creatures come into that lets you cast spells as if they had flash. That one's really, really good. And you mentioned Sunhome.
Yep.
Sunhome is good. Castle Wolf Run is really good. But a bunch of them aren't that good, and I've seen them in people's decks where they don't actually do anything.
That was, I think it's Stirring Wildwood. Is that part of that set?
That's a man
That's
land.
a man land.
That's
item.
the green-white.
I'm thinking of the green-white one that puts a counter on each creature you control. For
Gavany
5 mana.
Township.
Getting Township is really, really good.
That's a modern playable.
It's like weird. The Archangel is in the Innistrad collection of those.
Yep.
Yep.
So there's 2 different cycles we're talking about here, but they kind of are similar.
Yeah.
Each cycle has probably 2 or 3
Yeah.
decent playable ones.
And I've just seen enough of those where like people try to run the ones that aren't good because the good ones are so good.
And they're on their it's in their color.
It's in their colors, but they wind up just being a land you tap for colorless mana way too often when you could if you're running a good land in that slot.
Agreed.
So there's just a bunch of those that jumped out at me as lands. I had Maze of Ith in there as one I wanted to talk about. So I like Maze of Ith, but I just think it's not as amazing to me as it once was.
Right.
I do like looking back on the changes that I've seen between you guys and how it's like, okay, sit down, Dana, okay, watch his lands. And now it's like you forget about it and you're like, wait, does this deck still have a Maze of I don't remember if it has Maze of Ith or not.
Are there any trends like if a deck has X amount of the 1-color decks, do you run less or more than a 2-color deck? Do you intentionally pay attention to that?
Yes.
So how do you break that down?
I suppose if I'm going to play a 1-color deck, I'm okay with running 5 to 10 utility lands as long as it's helping out my game plan. Now, if I start going up into 2 or 3 colors, I cut that way back because I need to stay on color curve.
I would tend to agree. I think the mono-color decks, you have more wiggle room to play with, and the more colors you add, you have to make cuts.
Except for the problem, at least for me in my couple monocolor decks, is that at least the 2 that I run, I have multiple mana doublers in those decks. So then you're kind of doing that math where you're like, Well, I can run every single utility land for the most part and not have to worry about it, but it's also really nice to have plenty of forests because I've got like 5 different ways in this deck to make my forest tap for an extra mana every single time.
Yep.
So-
Think of your multicolor decks. You have that one land that taps for just legendary creatures.
Yes.
Beautiful card. I ended up getting that on turn 1 one game when I was playing.
On Tadaki the Cloud Keeper.
Played Reki on turn 2. It actually ended up killing me because I was paying way too much life to be way ahead of everybody,
And
but
some
not
of the board
actually
wipes.
getting ahead.
Sure. Yeah, that land is really good in that deck. I didn't run it for a long time because I read it and thought it just said legendary creatures. I'm like, I've got 25 legendary creatures in this deck, but I'm not going to run a land that only because it doesn't tap for colorless mana aside from casting legendary spells.
Yep.
So I'm like, well, it works for 25 spells in my deck. That's just not worth doing. And then it spiked when the legendary rule change happened. It went from being like a 20-cent card to like a $8 or $10 card. And I actually dug mine out because I'm like, I'm going to put it on deck box and trade it away. And I read it close. I'm like, oh, man, it's every spell. It's legendary spells. So then I went back and looked at my Reki deck, and I'm like, oh, I've got 46 legendary spells. So, like, literally half the cards in my deck
Draw you a card.
draw me a card and let me tap this to get 2 mana out of it. So basically, it's a second Ancient Tomb in that deck.
That's a good point you brought up about the mana doublers. I never actually thought about that way.
Yeah, in those, I mean, if you're
'Cause you
not
gotta
running mana doublers, then you can have all the freedom in the world to run utility lands in your monocolor decks. But like my green one in particular, I've got in my Reki deck, I've got Vernal Bloom in there, which doubles forests. I have, I don't have Gauntlet, but I have Extraplanar Lens. I have Caged Sun, and I have Zendikar Resurgent and Mana Reflection. I think
Yep,
are the
you have
5.
Mana
So
Do
I've
you
got
not
5
have
of them.
doubling cube in there?
I do not have doubling cube in there.
Okay.
Math is hard, dude.
It is. Yeah, right. And Selvala that taps for mana based on how big your creature is
Yep.
or
Yep.
something. So I have multiple ways to get a big chunk of mana, and so I don't want too many utility lands to kind of throw that off.
Yeah,
Um,
never came across my mind like that. Because I know when I was playing Mono Red for a while there, I had a bunch of mana doublers, but then still had a lot of utility lands in there. Never really noticed it, I guess, not working
Sure.
in my favor, but
And if you're in black, you can throw Urborg in, and that kind of offsets it because your
Yep.
lands then become swamps. So that kind of works
In your favor.
in your favor as well. We've touched on your Urborg. Do you guys run Urborg? Like, if I'm playing black, I put Urborg in the deck.
I totally agree with that.
If I have one, like I don't.
if I'm running mono black, I probably won't. I think
Okay.
it's just kind of redundant, and all you're doing is giving your opponents advantage.
Then you can help your opponents out. That's
Yep.
true.
If I'm playing multicolors, oh yeah, it gets jammed in. There's one of the first cards that goes in, and it's considered a black source when I'm building the deck.
And sometimes you say, oh, that Reliquary Tower is cool, but that game it didn't help me. I've never had a game where Urborg didn't help me.
I totally agree with that.
And it's always really, really good. And that's probably why it's back up to $20 or close to whatever it is right now. We talked about utility lands that we think are maybe overrated. How about underrated? Which ones do you guys like a lot that you think don't see enough play?
I have 2 of them for sure.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna start off with Inventor's Fair.
Ah, that's such a good card.
I do not see it very often played, and honestly, in Commander, most people's decks you're running 6 to 8 artifacts in there, anyways.
On the light side,
Right.
Yes, and all you need is 3 to go tutor,
right.
and you're gaining life. So there's I just don't see a downfall to the card, and it comes into play untapped, and grants you colorless mana.
The only deck I have it in right now is my Glissa deck, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And there's so many times too I'll use it to go get Crucible of Worlds.
And get
Oh,
it back.
no.
So I can
and then bring it
and then
back.
replay Inventor's Fair.
Oh no!
Ugly.
So let's journal around with artifacts, kids. But I mean, there's so many artifact commanders that
Right.
can take advantage of it. But even if you're not playing Brea or something, it's pretty easy to hit 3 artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
And I would jam it everywhere, but like I also agree that's been a really good addition in the last couple of years to the arsenal of utility lands.
Agreed. What about you, Max? We'll go on to you.
I have Alchemist Refuge. It's actually one of my
oh.
underrated ones.
That's the one that makes the spell uncounterable, correct?
Nope, that's the one that gives you flash. 2 and Simic gives you flash.
Okay.
I just think in the Simic decks I see in our playgroup, people don't run it.
They don't, and it's a very popular utility land on EDH Rec,
Right.
but I don't see it in our playgroup nearly as much as we should.
I think people are intimidated by the mana you got to put into it to get that.
Yes.
And, do that and cast that big spell you want to cast. Are you going to have enough? But if you're playing green-blue, especially just in a 2-color deck, you should be able to ramp crazy hard, so you never really have to worry about that.
Yeah, and if you're playing green-blue, it allows you to start dropping threats at end of people's turns.
For
allows
sure.
you to stay one step ahead of your opponents.
And since Chris brought it up, Boseiju, who shelters all,
There we go.
is one of my other ones.
Okay. Boseiju is really frustrating to play against.
Yeah,
It is.
I am actually tearing my Mizzix deck apart, probably within the next couple weeks.
But so many times you play Boseiju in that deck and you're like, well, we're
We're
now
done.
over.
Yep.
The game's
Yeah,
over.
we got to figure something out. We
Yep.
got to
Yeah.
everyone turn on him.
And it's
Right,
actually,
yeah, exactly.
that's going into Brago,
Oh, okay.
Very nice. I like it.
right?
For sure that
Pay
makes
2
sense.
life to you can't counter my Sphinx's Rev, you can't counter
Yep.
my Rift, you can't counter anything.
Well, the one I have on here, the only one I put down, but I put on Arcane Lighthouse.
That was my second one.
Is it okay? Well,
That's why I wanted to have you guys go because I
Alright.
figured someone had that one as well.
Arcane Lighthouse lets you tap one in a colorless and tap to remove hexproof from a creature until end of turn. Or creatures your opponents control lose hexproof and can't gain it, I believe.
Until end of turn, creatures your opponents control lose Hexproof and Shroud and
And Shroud,
can't
okay.
have Hexproof and Shroud.
So not only does it deal with Sigarda or Ural or whatever, Lightning Greaves, like they stop working till end of turn. It's not like they would continue to apply the effect. It just takes away Hexproof and
Yep.
Shroud. It's saved me multiple times in games.
And I do not see people running it hardly ever.
I can't think of many people. Our friend Blake has it in a Gonti deck of his.
I played in
I'm-
Mogus because of all my targeted removal, and I need
Yeah.
a way of getting rid of the hexproof. I have to kill something.
There's multiple times it has saved my butt. I can think of at least 2 different times it's saved me against someone's archetype of endurance, which is the Theros enchantment creature that gives all your creatures hexproof, I believe.
Yep.
It's a 6-mana green creature that gives all your creatures hexproof, and creatures your opponents control can't gain hexproof. And at least twice it's saved me when someone's played that card specifically.
Oh, it's going to bother me. I can't think of the name of that card because it's from the Theros block.
What are you looking for?
The one that you were just saying. The one that gives hexproof and removes
Archetype of endurance.
That's what it is. Okay.
Yep.
Didn't hear you say the name.
Yep. So yeah, multiple times it saved me from that one. So that was Chris's second one. Do you have another one, Max, or is that it?
I have Mirror Pool.
Okay. Mirror Pool has been probably my favorite utility land of the last. Inventor's Fair is good, but I would say Mirror Pool is probably even
Yeah.
better than
Yep.
Inventor's Fair.
Miracle was on my list too, but I knew Max was going to bring it
Yeah.
up because
I mean-
it's one of his almost like his pet land.
It is my
cards.
pet land. Besides just making the copy of a creature, I enjoy copying Rishkar's Expertise.
Oh God. That's
Or
I love double berserks. That is awesome.
Double Berserks is fun. I mean, there's so much to do with that card, and even if you only get one shot out of it, it's worth it.
I've won games with it before, being able to copy a creature I have before the end of your turn. I'm gonna make a token copy of this because someone's done the math, but like you can't kill me this next turn on the swing back.
Yep.
So I'm gonna do something, and I'll be like, before the end of your turn, I'm like, Mirror Pool and copy, because I run it in my Sphinx deck. I'll copy this 6/6 Sphinx. So you were doing the math, thinking I can only swing for 6. but I
There's
can
a
hit you
reason
for
that
12.
they're my nemesis. Seriously.
So yeah, I love Mirror Pool. I've copied a writer application with it before. I copied a brainstorm one time with it before because I was desperate, or not a brainstorm, was it a ponder or something? But I've copied like a really bad draw spell before with it just to dig down that much further, and it was absolutely worth it because it's only 2 mana and a tap to copy a instant or sorcery spell you control. It's 2 mana because 4 for the creature.
Yep.
Correct.
And I
It's 2
think
for the
you
instant
sack it
sorcery.
for the creature, but you don't for the spell.
You do sack it for the spell as well.
You do for the spell. Okay.
Yeah. But still, I mean, like if you're drawing down to an answer or something, it's absolutely worth it.
2 and a colorless sack to copy the spell. 4 and a colorless tap to copy the to make the token.
And if you're playing any deck filled with a bunch of big beat sticks, you probably should have it in your deck.
Mm-hmm.
Like I put it in those 5-color dragon decks. And I guess you don't have a lot of room to breathe there because it's 5 colors. But being able to copy one of those beater dragons when no one's ready for it is
A
fantastic.
Craterhoof Behemoth, anything
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just win the game.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love Mirror Pool. All right. I think we covered most of it. You guys, anything else you want to say about utility lands right now?
I'm good.
I'm good.
One of the things I want to do then, we've kind of did this a little bit with our, because we mentioned putting Monarch in decks. came up on the show a week or 2 shows ago, I think, 1 show
Yep.
ago, whatever. And Max has put at least one monarch card in your deck. What did you put in?
I will be putting in Keeper of the Keys into my Brago deck.
Okay.
I put one in mine as well.
And I put Thorn of the Black Rose back in
Glissa.
my Glissa deck.
I put Palace Jailer and Alesha.
Okay. So now I haven't had a chance to play since then, and Max hasn't
Nor have I.
either. But next week we all should have some Monarch cards and let's get a little Monarch action going. So I think,
Mulligan until we hit our Monarch cards and see what happens.
yeah, well, maybe
Mine's a 5-drop, so no.
but I thought maybe we'll do something similar this week and give everyone kind of a homework assignment like that and say, let's try one new utility land in a deck. Because I have one in mind for myself. And if you don't have an idea right now, maybe just come up with it next week or
geez.
something and let us know. But the one I want to try it out, I've wanted to run in a deck and I never have, is Tower of the Magistrate, which is taps for colorless mana, or you can tap it to give a creature protection from artifacts until end of turn. So you can,
no.
so you can knock equipment off that Kemba,
Yep.
or be able to block an artifact creature coming in. But I feel like it's probably really hit or miss. I feel like there's probably plenty of games where it's going to do absolutely no good at all to have it in your deck. But I feel like the games where it works, it's backbreaking. I think you probably want to be running it mostly in a meta where you've got multiple friends that are playing equipment decks or Voltron decks, or
I think just the ability to stop Lightning Greaves from suiting up an annoying creature.
sometimes
would be
that might be
wonderful.
worth it.
Yep.
So I'm going to try that specifically in a couple decks because I want to get it out and I want to actually see it in play because I've always been really curious to see if it actually functions decently when I'm playing it.
I'm gonna have to find a land now.
So you
I
guys-
can't
Yeah,
really
me
think
too.
of
Maybe
one.
for next week you can come up with one and we'll try it out and then we'll report back in a month on our Monarch experiment and we'll see how our new utility land experiment went as well.
Yep.
All right. I think that's all we got this week. We have a closing question. So have you thought of like a utility land that you'd like to see in the game that isn't in the game right now?
I could not come up with something that,
There's no niche that you think should be filled that isn't been filled?
not that I could find in the amount of time I went digging. I'm sure if I put more thought into it, I could come up with one.
I would say a land that gives you a better card draw option at a decent mana cost.
Okay.
Such as you have, I do believe, Skyreach Sanctum allows you
Yep.
to draw if you have no cards in hand or
Yeah.
something. Or there's another one that allows you to draw and discard, or each opponent draws and discard.
Mhm.
Desolate Lighthouse lets you loot.
Something that's just like straight up tap, draw card, discard card. Give me a Merfolk Looter on a land. That would
Okay.
make my day just heavenly.
That would be really. What does the flipped Azcanta do?
Lets you look at the top card if it's an
Top four
top
cards
4,
for an instant
grab
or
an
sorcery.
instant or sorcery, put the
Okay.
rest in the bottom of your library.
Yep.
That's still pretty decent.
There's the ship that flips that lets you do like 5 different things and allows you
Yeah.
to draw and discard.
It's
or
like
draw
the
a card.
trading post on a
Yeah. Yep.
land.
The one I've always kind of wanted to see is you have Academy Ruins, which lets you put an artifact on top of your library. It's blue and a colorless to activate. I'd like to see maybe one or more of those kind of effects. Like an enchantment one would be really useful in green or white.
An
Would be a nice
instant
thing.
one in red would be cool.
Yeah. Or blue even. I guess blue has the artifact one. But yeah, I mean, it's not a full cycle, but like I think that would be a kind of cool thing to see. And I don't know if they'd ever actually do it, but there's absolutely no reason there couldn't be an Urborg to a Yawgmoth in every single color. Maybe not green, I guess. Maybe that would be too much in green. But I don't think it would be.
I think green and red, just for flavor wise, because you can't just turn everything into a mountain.
I guess, right.
And you
True.
can't turn everything into forest, but you could level the plain and then level everything and becomes plains. Or
Flood
you have
everything.
you have a tsunami that turns everything into islands.
But I think they could finish that cycle. I mean, that would be not broken, I don't think. Maybe I'm missing something. But black, even more than any other color, tends to care about doing things with its lands.
Yeah.
I guess green does too, but green tends just to ramp them. It doesn't really usually count them.
Yep.
Black tends to count its lands a lot. So I feel like if it's good enough, if black can do it, the color that already has Cabal Coffers can do it.
I
It's
can't
not going to
get
be broken
behind
in
that 'cause
green.
It reminds me of the modern game that I lost to Merfolk when I was playing Burn. And I got up and I went up to the judge and I was like, I have a serious question for you. I looked him straight in the face, just dead cold face. I'm like, how can a card turn my mountain into a lake? I don't understand it. And he laughed it off because spreading seas turns a land into an
You bet
island.
it
It
does.
doesn't
Yep.
work that way.
All right, I think that is it for Commander Central. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week. I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.